So of course we are going to begin the ceremony. Before I even do any welcomes or introductions, we will begin with Amazing Grace. So this is Clara Ellen, Neil's granddaughter. Thank you, Clara. For those of you who might not know, the bagpipes mean a lot to our family. And just before I begin, just a reminder for everyone, if you could please either mute or turn off your cell phones. I had to be reminded to do that myself. For those of you who may not know what I do, I think as I look across the crowd and talk with people coming in, I know most, if not all of you. I'm Doug Wagstaff, I'm Neil's son, and I'm going to be master of ceremonies for today and provide a bit of a eulogy. But before I begin on a eulogy, I want to welcome all of you and thank all of you for everyone coming together today and taking time out of your lives to share with Neil's family a day of remembrance. Thank you to everyone who has given Neil and Mary so much support over the past few years. And I thank you for the condolences over the phone, social media, even on the street, and stopping by the house to speak with Mom to check in and see how she was doing. Thank you for the food and for the cards that were delivered to the house and all of your generosity and care. Neil didn't want to have a service. Frankly, he hated funerals. He shared with me on many occasions, well, not often, whenever I was at a funeral with him, he would share this with me. He felt obligated to go to funeral services. He didn't want one for himself. He did, however, open the door just a little bit in his will. He did give us permission, just slightly. He said, if the family insisted, and those were his words, there could be some kind of service. But he had one very clear, all caps in his will: no religion. No hymns, no prayers, no Bible readings. That wasn't Neil's thing. On this note, Neil respected everyone's views. He respected different beliefs. He did not discriminate. He didn't preach about his own beliefs. He just lived his life in action, respecting the views and respecting one's own personal beliefs. So, however it is that you personally find your solace in times like this, whether it be through religion, faith, or spirituality, or guided by science, please feel comfort in the fact that Neil would respect your choice and how you remember him and how you work through this period of time. So our celebration today is different. Neil enjoyed storytelling, and to the bane of all of those who have married into the Wagstaff family, we tell stories, and they're never short. Neil enjoyed photography, taking pictures, videos. Both Neil and Mary love sharing their pictures and videos. So today reflects that kind of celebration of Neil. You might think I've already started the eulogy, but I haven't yet. Before I begin Neil's eulogy and to celebrate his life, we want to share as a family a moment of gratitude from Mary and all of us. We want to recognize the healthcare professionals that supported Neil through the many stages of his last journey. Dr. Julian Goodjim, and I'm probably going to mess up a few of these pronunciations, but the rest are easy. Dr. Jim, Dr. McCall, and Dr. Nasapa. He saw a number of doctors in his last few years, and our family cannot thank enough for their care and personal touch. Also a huge thank you to the staff at the Red Deer Hospital Emergency Unit, Cross Cancer Institute, Three Hills Hospital, Home Care, and EMS personnel, who all so often provided Neil and Mary support through the most trying of times. And a thank you to the Red Deer County Fire Station 11 Elnora District, the members of the Elnora Fire Department, who are friends and neighbors. When medical support is so far away for this area, they went beyond the call of duty to help Neil and Mary in the time they needed the assistance most. As I said, when medical assistance was so far away or late at night. Thank you to all of those members of the Elnora Fire Department. And despite my earlier comments about Neil's beliefs about religion, a thank you to everyone who had and continues to have Neil and Mary in their prayers and their prayer lists. On behalf of our family, thank you to everyone. So with his eulogy, I'm going to start at the end. My mom, Mary, she shared with me that Dr. McCall, Neil's palliative care doctor, told Neil he was like a cat with 9 lives. This was last fall after he'd been in the hospital several times where she did not think he would recover and be released. She thought he had come to the end more than once, only to soldier on through many more similar experiences. Neil John Wagstaff passed away at the Three Hills Hospital on Sunday, July 3rd, at the age of 73 years, only days short of 74, following a 4-year battle with renal cancer. In the end, it was cancer that took Neil sooner in this life than what should have been. My cousin, Stephanie Pemberton, she sent me a message earlier this week. She reached out with a short but very touching, supportive message. She can relate to this experience, as she too lost her father, and lost Uncle Dick, to cancer sooner than life deserved. In her message to me, she described cancer as nasty and unfair. Cancer is painful. It is nasty. It is unfair. Not only to the individual who is a patient dealing with the physical and emotional pain, but it also inflicts pain in different ways to those around the individual who is suffering with cancer. The pain the patient experiences, that suffering mercifully ends. That those who survive, those who are friends and family, who care for the individual very much, then come waves of grief. It will be different for every individual, whether they are family, friends, or acquaintances, and you never know when that will hit. I have a good friend who happens to be a psychologist. I've heard her explain grief many times. In her practice, she talks about resilience and connection. She says we're wired to deal with difficult things. She doesn't sugarcoat it that it's easy, but she explains we get through it, and it will be different for every individual. We get through with patience and understanding. We are social beings, she explains. And social beings are wired for connection. We will work through the grief through times like this, with the patience and understanding and support of others. Now let's work through some of that journey and remember Neil. I've struggled over this last week. How do you do justice to capture one's life of 74 years and do it in mere minutes? Well, I'm going to start with a quick synopsis of what he did. And then I'm going to circle back and touch on the person he was while he accomplished those things. The life of Neil John Wagstaff. Neil is a son, a brother, an uncle, a husband, a father, a grandfather, and a friend to many. Born July 5th, 1947, the first child, the son of a farmer, Norman Joseph Wagstaff, and a nurse, Kathleen Maud Morris. Neil married Helen Mary Pemberton, Mary, on August 23rd, 1969, in Elnora at St. John's Anglican Church. Neil's education, St. David's. St. David's Anglican Church. Neil attended primary school in Huxley, then moved on to Trochu Valley High School. Receiving a teaching certificate from the U of A, Neil achieved a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture from the University of Alberta. He later attained a certificate in Economic Development from the University of Waterloo. His career: in early years, Neil worked lumbering, well, maybe not quite career yet, just jobs. Neil worked lumbering, a bit of oil field, even retail sales, some construction, crop inspecting, and environmental research. He started his career with teaching, junior and senior high school industrial arts, as a teacher for 7 years. He then progressed to rural economic development, consulting for 13 years under Buffalo Lake Regional Resources. Well, he freelanced on the side as a wedding photographer. For a while he freelanced on the side as a wedding photographer, and you might have seen some of those photos in his portfolio that was with the items we have displayed on the table. He operated as an independent computer sales and consulting business for 15 years. This overlapped his years of economic development work and farming. And he privately trained a number of individuals and groups in the operation of computers and computer programs. He shared with me once, when I kind of questioned him why he did that, this was a number of years ago, and he said, I can sell 3 or 4 computer programs to farmers or friends in a winter, and that's a whole hell of a lot easier than 50 head of cattle. So he didn't do cattle, he did computers. Growing bedding plants and flowers in a small greenhouse for sale at farmers markets across central Alberta, well, that was more of a hobby than a career. I still profess that his greenhouse business was founded off of child labor. His true passion was farming. Involved with the family farm along with his father, brothers, and wife Mary for the past 40 years. And that continued in the later years with his daughters and son-in-law, Andrew and Jackie. His public service: Alberta Farm Implement Board, Alberta Pulse Growers Commission. For 8 years, he was with the Wild Rose Agricultural Producers, an association previously known as Unifarm and now known as the Alberta Federation of Agriculture. And he served for 4 years as president. Cooperators Insurance. 14 years as a school board trustee for the County of Red Deer. 12 years on a board of directors for Mid Central Credit Union, which is now part of the large amalgamated Service Credit Union. 11 years with the Economic Development Officers of Alberta Association. And he was active with a number of local community organizations in the Elnora area. That's what he did. But that's not Neil's story. As I said, Neil is a son, a brother, an uncle, husband, father, grandfather, and a friend to many. I'll start with as early years as we can. Of course, the very early years, there isn't anyone left to share those very early years as the circle of life has unfolded. But I start as a brother. I'll share just a few sentences of how he was a brother. I spoke with my uncles, and they said there's so much we could share, so many stories we could tell, but that will have to be one-on-one. Gary. Neil was sort of the kingpin of us boys. He was a mentor. He looked after a lot of stuff. He took on leading us, like creating Wagstaff resources. He took on things like that in our life to bring us along and guide us right. Lauren. I never remember him not being there. He was always there for us. He looked after us a lot, especially when we were younger and Dad was working in the fields and Mom was working shifts at the hospital. He was always the big brother. Glenn recalls Neil coming back from university, sharing all the things he wanted to try, the different techniques and the types of crops he wanted to grow. Their dad, Norm, thought Neil was talking gibberish. Like, what the hell are fava beans? Neil was someone we always went to for advice, not just farming, on all sorts of things. Neil always gave a thoughtful, honest answer, and it was not just an opinion. He researched things, he knew what he was talking about, he wouldn't just give you bullshit. I looked up to him. He was humble, he was an honest man. A cousin. And in this circumstance, a cousin like a brother and sister. Growing up, Neil was close, arguably closer than that with his own brothers, with his cousins Ian Wagstaff and Sheila Kennedy. A bond forever shared. In the early years and through their teens, Ian and Neil were nearly inseparable, as their dads, Dave and Norm, farmed together. That left Neil and Ian to work together. They played together, got into a bit of trouble together. There were many hours of kick the can, croquet, and Monopoly where the two older boys, Neil and Ian, would beat up on the younger brothers, Gary, Lauren, and Glenn. Ian also recalls the many times he and Neil stayed at Uncle and Auntie's, that is, Grandma and Grandpa Morris. So many memories. And speaking with both Ian and Sheila, that was their comment. They were more than just good friends. Many good times, well into their adult years. For all sakes and purposes, Neil was a brother. And the same can be said for the older cousin, though there was a bit of distance, physically. Harry Cont, cousin Harry, known to all of his extended family, his Uncle Harry, was also one of those such people with me, like a brother. Neil's passions and interests. Neil loved photography. He built a darkroom in the basement to develop his own film and photography. Neil loved to play cards and board games, but cards and dominoes mostly. Neil loved growing plants and crops. He often had grain sprouting in window sills. And in the greenhouse, there was forever some experimental flower or crop being tested. All legal, of course. Neil loved to tinker with his electronics and computers, and in fact, and up until a couple of months ago, and I don't think this was by his doing, but more so my mother's, he had kept every computer he had ever had. Stored in the office, the basement, the garage, the shed, you name it, there was electronic gadgets everywhere. Right from his Apple II, the very first one he ever had, to his Compacts and his Hewlett-Packard laptops, everything. It's still around. Neil loves keeping up on current affairs and reading non-fiction. He loved his clarinet, which is on display. Neil's sister-in-law, Joan, who we affectionately call AJ, she named him Mr. Fix-It. He would fix, or at least jerry-rig, anything. The things he would manufacture did not always look the best engineered, but they often did the job. They often did the job. And if they didn't, he would tinker with it until it did. What others would see as junk, he saw as the materials for some future fix-it job. And that is also collected everywhere. Neil loved to fish. His university buddies, his grandkids, his Baja friends, they will all attest to that. Neil loved camping, which led to a lot of fishing. And Neil loved the ocean. For a kid who grew up on the farm on the prairies, he fell in love with the ocean. And that makes so much more sense now if we think about it, why Neil and Mary fell in love with the Baja. And why on our family trips, he loved when we went to the East Coast. He loved all the trips we made to the BC and the West Coast. Neil loved the ocean. Neil's formal education, for Neil, university was more than just a time for formal education. He loved, and I don't use this word loosely, he loved his time at the University of Elnora. He shared that with one of his grandchildren, Victoria, when she moved into Lister Hall. He said they lived on the same floor their first year of university. He also commented that Lister Hall had not changed much in 50 years. And whether you agree or not, they share the same belief that the University of Alberta is the greatest university in the world. For Neil, it shaped his world. The University of Alberta provided him with opportunities that lasted a lifetime. His university buddies he met forged strong relationships, and they have stayed connected to this very day. It also provided him with the tools for a lifetime of careers. Not a career, plural, careers. In teaching, in the business of economic development, and of course in agriculture and farming. But most important in Neil's life in Edmonton, while attending university, he met the love of his life, Mary. Neil's accomplishments. Before talking about Neil's accomplishments, I need to preface this with something he often shared with me many times growing up. He'd tell me, and I'm paraphrasing, but he'd tell me, when you take a stand and you have an opinion and you take an action on that, there will be those who support you, who for the most part will be silent. But you will know you have their support. But your most vocal will be those who oppose. Don't let that deter you. The things he felt were his accomplishments, those accomplishments would very well meet what I just described. They were not the most easy, and they had their controversy. But he was very proud that he was involved in it. And he didn't consider it about him. The things he accomplished, the things he was most proud of, they were something he felt was important to the communities he served, and it positively impacted people. As a farm leader, serving as the president of Alberta's General Farm Organization from 1999 to 2004, during this time he was a member also of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture Board of Directors and a member of the National Safety Net Advisory Committee to the Federal Minister of Agriculture. That was one of his most proudest highlights of his public service. Wild Rose Agricultural Producers, which was, as I said earlier, previously Unifarm, which I share with you, he always believed was the best name, Unifarm, because it represented a unification of all farmers, not a segment of grain or beef or hog or chicken or pork or milk or egg or wheat or barley, whatever. He didn't mind that those existed, but he felt this represented all farmers. And I'm not just sharing this because, I'm sharing it because that was his passion. The work for that organization captured what Neil was really, truly about deep down. Helping others grow their communities. Neil was a strong believer in cooperatives, whether that be in organizations that he was formally involved with or that he supported. From supporting a credit union or the United Farmers of Alberta, or the Alberta Wheat Pool, or gas cooperatives, the list would go on and on. Those types of organizations that he felt so strongly about. He firmly believed in the principle of these organizations because they collectively acted in the best interest of their members and strengthened rural communities. I asked him some time ago what things in his career he was proud of doing. Just quickly, accomplishments he took great pride in being part of, and here's 3. And they were the 3 he repeated to me more than once. On Highway 595, just north of Elnora, for those of you who aren't familiar with the highways, the Mackenzie Crossing Bridge, getting it built. Linking Big Valley and Stettler and the rest of the East Country to Innisfail. To him and many others, that was an important economic and social linkage. The work to save the railway between Kamloops and Drumheller, lobbying the federal government to not remove the rail line and not abandon the important commerce route, and support those farming areas, their communities, their businesses, and their people. And the third one, an approval for the construction of a new hospital in Elnora. He believed, he stood up for it, he actioned that services and quality of life in rural Alberta was important, not just here at home in Elnora, but in all rural areas. Then I had it pointed out to me as I was writing this. These are not his greatest accomplishments. These were not his greatest pride. His family. His kids and grandkids, he was most proud to be a father and a grandfather. So I'm going to speak to him as a dad and a granddad. First off, his relationship with his nephews, Shane and Brandon Wagstaff, he equally took pride and interest as much as he does in his own grandchildren. Over the past few weeks as a family, we were very fortunate. We were able to gather as the entire family, share some time together. So I will share with you a little bit of what his grandkids thought about him. I asked all of Neil's grandkids if in 10 years someone asked you about their granddad, how would you remember him? So Grace and Victoria, his oldest two. Now remember, these two were born so close they could have been twins. Their answers were identical. They both said playing cards, dominoes, fishing, learning to drive out at the farm with Granddad on gravel roads, camping trips, visiting Harry and Carol's cabin. Elena, shooting gophers at the farm, learning to play sticks and train dominoes. Him watching every game he could on live stream while she was playing hockey across the country, and then him telling her about it. Ethan. Before I get to Ethan's comments, our family owes a debt of gratitude to Ethan. He has collected what I would term a family artifact. He recorded more than 10 hours of Granddad He recorded more than 10 hours of Neil talking about his life. We haven't had a chance to go through those recordings yet. But I know for sure, Ethan, those are gems. Thank you. So Ethan's memory is about all of Granddad's stories. And of course, playing cards. And the quirky little sayings that will stick forever. The Granddad. Janie picking Saskatoons. Harry and Carol's cabin trips. A frisbee stealing gopher. I'm not sure what that's all about, but it's actually a memory of Granddad playing with her and Ethan on a camping trip. Jacob, farming operations. Saving every piece of lumber you can. Gopher hunting, crop checking, everything farming. Molly, driving lessons around the farm, starting when I was only 9 years old. Fishing in the Baja with Granddad. All the card games where he seemed to always win. Him teaching us to gamble with pennies. Fixing the greenhouse together. Clara, teaching me driving, playing cards, learning to gamble. Just started with pennies and then grew. Fishing, barbecues, a farmer, loving plants. Emery, bocce ball, and all the games. And the clothes Granddad would wear. Emery's eyes lighted up when he said that. The rest of us would laugh and giggle when we hear the clothes Neil would wear. For Emery, he loved it. And as you see with some of the shirts that are being worn by his grandsons and one son-in-law, Neil loved crazy shirts like that, like pineapples or palm trees or whatever his son-in-law Chad has on his shirt. And briefly, of course, his kids, my sisters and I. We all have a special connection with our dad, and it's all different. I think as any parent would have with their children. Mine is politics. Inevitably, we could never have a conversation that didn't somehow work in some type of politics. And it didn't matter if it was in person at a visit or over the phone. We always talked politics. Didn't always agree, but we always talked politics. Jody, storytelling. That knack, that connection of storytelling. And research. Jody and Dad shared that thrust for knowledge and to get things right with an honesty and integrity. Those are connections Jody has. And Jackie, farming. Farming. And more farming. As a husband, I told my Uncle Glenn it was a part of this eulogy I had to strategically place or I would not make it through. This is it. It's the special relationship of Neil and Mary. A young romance that grew strong through the thick and thin of life's turmoil and triumphs. A love like no other. Mary is the love of Neil's life, and vice versa. We've all witnessed this love, especially so in the last couple of years. The common wedding vow, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, let's be honest, the better is easy. The for worse in sickness is overwhelmingly hard. Mom, you are a saint. We've all witnessed it. Your children, your grandchildren, your extended family, Neil's extended family, and your friends. We've all witnessed your devotion and love for Neil. On Sunday night, the day Dad had passed, after everyone had left or went to bed, my mother and I shared some time together and talked. And just before she finally went to bed, she put it best. She said Neil was a pain the last few months. I added a bit of humor. I'm not sure it was appropriate, but whatever. I had a bit of humor at that point. I said, just the last few months, Mom? What about the last 50-some years? She snickered. She broke a brief smile and continued. He was in pain. When he fell, and he fell a lot, I struggled to pick him up. She paused, began to walk up the stairs and stopped me behind. But I'm still going to miss him. Mom, when you miss him, close your eyes. Close your eyes. And you will hear, "Jeez, Christ, Mary!" Mom, your love and all of our love for Neil. What strikes me as I listen to Neil's friends and family, even as people were streaming in today, Neil's friends and family, both near and far, reminisce about a life lived. He was honest, he was fair, he was respected, he is loved, and he will be missed. But he will not be forgotten. Today, we together, figuratively, walk Neil home. Death ends a life. It does not end a relationship. Neil will always be a father, a grandfather, a husband, an uncle, and a friend. That never ends. With that, we are going to continue on through a program of telling some stories. Beginning with Stories of Dad, Janie and Jackie.
I get to go first. After Doug just made me cry, now I have to read what I wrote, so bear with me. Good afternoon, and thank you all for taking the time to attend and show your respects. For those that don't know me, I'm Jody Young, Neil and Mary's middle child. There are so many stories about Dad. For me, some of my fondest memories are sitting listening to Dad, the storyteller, as he talked about the places he'd been and the adventures he'd been on. We shared many moments around a campfire where he would tell tales of his youth and his recent travels down to the Baja. I will be forever grateful that over the last few months he took the time So anybody doesn't know me, I'm not a crier, so bear with me. That he took the time to talk with my son and share those stories and the family history. And I think it was a blessing for them both. It was for him to get that out there and know that people knew about that, and for us to hear it. So earlier this week, Doug asked me what it was that I shared with our dad. As Doug said, he clearly had his politics, and Jackie clearly had the farming, and I realized for me, it really wasn't a straightforward answer. What did I have with my dad? And as I thought about it, I think of all these things we have as we grow up with our parents. What I'd shared with my father, all those moments I had as part of our family life. The good, the bad, and sometimes the ugly that I might have brought to the table. But I cherish them all. I think about him teaching me to ride the bike, letting it go, and then watching me wipe out the dirt and sticking me back on it and away we go again. Him going out there and catching a baseball with me. Him letting me tag along to all Doug's hockey and ball games. Sometimes I think he might have regretted I was in tow, but I'll always remember being at a particular ball tournament with my brothers and going to the dugout, and the mosquitoes were horrific. So what does a good dad do? He hands me a can of bug spray, in kind words, basically told me to bug off until the end of the game. This memory will always stick with me because I think this was maybe one of my creative moments in life that has stuck with us. I discovered that if you spray bug spray next to a dusty vehicle, it will leave a pattern on the side of the vehicle. So I decided, maybe in my time that I had to wait till the ball game was done, I'd make some nice designs, and then it evaporated. No harm done, everybody knows what's going on. Then I remember pulling into my parents' yard with my father getting out, and he gets out and he's unpacking my brother's ball stuff, and he turns and he looks at the vehicle. And there, raising, bubbling in the paint of the car, is my brother's name, my sister's name, and a big old smiley face. I may have got my ass whipped that day. I think about Dad taking us fishing. We talked about his passion with that, and I remember the times we went out to Pine Lake perch fishing, and it was just one perch after another perch after another perch, and just how much fun we had as he was teaching us to stick those worms on the hook and throw the fishing rod over, and the fact that we just got to do that over the years, and it didn't seem to matter that we were girls. Those were things that we got to do. Dad spent a lot of time teaching us all to drive, as you've heard. I think I was also 9 years old when Dad taught me how to drive a truck. I think that was more about farm labor than it was about teaching me to drive a truck, but I learned how to drive a truck in the farm machinery. I may have got cursed once or twice when I drove a little close to things or over things, but it was good time spent. I will fondly remember a trip now that we went to Saskatchewan to visit my sister, where I traveled in a car with my husband Chad and my father. I was driving. Dad felt, as did Chad, that it was about necessary about every 10 minutes or less to tell me ways I could improve my driving. And I still think it was fine, I gotta say. So we're good. Things I think about with my dad, is just him picking us up when we've fallen down, and I don't always mean in the physical sense. We all have different times in our lives when things haven't quite maybe gone the way we planned it, and it's just picking yourself back up, dusting it off, and moving forward. Maybe learning some lessons, maybe not, but we just keep moving forward. And he was just there as a sounding board when we needed it. As an adult, I've come to realize how truly special all those times were. One of my earliest memories of my father is sitting reading stories with him. A lot of those days he would still be dirty and dusty in his farm clothes. He would come in from the field, and we'd read us a bedtime story. And I think he must have read Dr. Seuss's Go Dog Go at least 1,000 times. I remember him also coming in, and I'd be on the volleyball court playing volleyball, and we'd look over it again. There's my dad in his farm clothes, and he's just taking a break. He probably should have been in the field doing what you're supposed to be doing farming, but he took the time away from it to come watch our game. And I think that's one of the things about my dad, is he recognized the importance of taking that time and spending it with your loved ones. In my teenage years, I spent a lot of time with my dad on the farm. I will never forget, I was 16, heading out to fuel the combines with the Fukushima boys. Dad and John were supposed to be following shortly behind us. And at that time, my dad had it set up. We had 2 trucks. One had a slip tank in it with diesel, and one had a slip tank with gas. And what you did is you always came, you got the first truck, you fueled the first combine. You got the second truck, you fueled the second combine. Well, that day we arrived, first truck's got a flat tire. So what do? You take the second truck and fuel the first combine. You finish fueling the first combine, you go to fix the flat tire, because we've now learned how to do these things, as you're waiting for your dad and John to arrive, and all of a sudden you have an eureka moment and you realize you've just put the wrong type of fuel in the wrong type of combine. And this is a big, big no-no, and this is not going to go well when your father arrives. So he pulls into the bin yard, and I tell him what we've done. He laughs. That's not a funny joke, but he starts laughing. Funny joke, okay, let's move on. No, Dad, we put the wrong fuel in the wrong combine. It proceeded to be a 30-minute conversation of him laughing to then him realizing we're not joking. to then yelling, to then me getting in the car and driving away, flipping open a door to the Fukushima boys, my sister, asking them to get in, them looking at me as if I'm crazy, and we drive off, or I drive off by myself. My father proceeded, we at that time had a CB radio in the old Pontiac car, because of course we need a radio in the car to communicate while we're farming. So I remember my dad telling me all sorts of wonderful stuff over the radio as I'm driving back into town, and how I need to turn my ass around and get back there and help to sort this out. And I was of the opinion if he's in that type of mood, I might be a little stubborn like my father was. I ain't going back. And I will always love my granddad Norm for this, because all of a sudden granddad came over the CB radio and he said to me, Neil, I recall you doing something like that yourself when you were a child. So I'm now listening on the side of the road, because I haven't decided if I'm going home yet or not, to my grandfather and my dad having a conversation back and forth about me knowing better, my dad knowing better, back and forth, and finally my granddad says to my dad, you were old enough to know better. There's radio silence, and that was the end of that. I will never forget the year I helped my father put a crop in up at the kid place on the hill. I'd just come back from spending a year in Australia, and I was home for a while, and that was one of the years I probably spent the most time putting that crop in. I helped him seed, helped him harrow, picking the rocks, and just basically spent that entire spring and heading in putting that crop in. And that crop, I still remember it was just starting to sprout through the ground, and we had a wonderful hailstorm come through. And absolutely flattened the crop. And I remember driving out there with my dad to check that crop. And I had seeing all those newly emerged plants absolutely destroyed. Then we proceeded, for me helping him, to plant it all again. And that was the day that I decided I would never be a farmer. I shared with you, my dad loved the family games, be it a board game, cards, or outdoor games like bocce. I will always remember a Christmas that Dad played board games with us for basically 3 days straight. Mom kept us supplied with snacks, and we played till the wee hours of the morning. And over the years, we played a lot of games as a family. Dad was always competitive, and I think it was fitting that he won the last family game of Oh Hell that we played together just a couple of weeks ago. For me, I'm going to look back with fondness of all the different moments I got to share with my father. And as Dad said, Dad loved photography. He was always at the end of that camera, and you'll see it in the pictures that we've captured him. He's got a video recorder in his hand, or a camera, and I just sometimes think, what was he seeing through the lens, and how we've just captured those moments in time. We were very fortunate that Dad would take the time when we were children to bring us into his dark room, and he would, in his teaching way, explain to us what the chemicals were and where they went. And I think for how young we were, he was so very, very patient with us. For me, one of the memories that I vaguely recall is there is an importance in locking a photography developing room where you have small children in a household, especially after you've shown them how to use these chemicals and mix them together. I don't think I need to add to the rest of that story. Dad was such a warm-hearted, kind, and caring man who had so much patience. He could be so serious, and yet he had such a sense of adventure. And he knew the importance of taking the time to let loose and have some fun. Dad will be dearly missed. And as it is for me, I'm going to say cheers to my father with you all present. How about it, Jack?
Jody may have thought she'd won up to me by jumping to the mic before me, but as I often say, they saved the best for last again. So it's all good. As a little precursor before I get to this, I think there's a few funny things as I've listened to Doug and to Jody. None of us spoke to each other or read each other's notes, and yet there seems to be some overlap of a few things we said. But one of the things I said to them last Sunday was, when we knew Dad didn't really want something, I said to them, so we tell stories because that's what Dad did. And I said, all three of us are like Dad, and we have the ability to speak, and that's something that he gave us. And so why not have the three of us share things with all of you? So that's what we've been doing. And on top of that, Doug did say yesterday or the day before, he asked, "It's 5 minutes good, girls?" And I wasn't sure whether 5 minutes meant 5 minutes each or 5 minutes total between the two of us, but Jody clearly went over 5, and so I'll do the best I can do with my short notes here. But as everyone else has said, I'm happy to share a few stories with you guys, but unlike Jody, who says she's not a crier, I'm like father, like daughter. I cry when I'm happy, I cry when I'm sad, and I would cry if there was a complete stranger in the back of the room that started to shed a tear. So just bear with me as I go through my stories. Dad and I took a trip to Australia together back in 1999. If you want to grow a bond, then at age 18, spend 3 weeks sleeping in a tent and in hostels with your dad. On the tent nights, Dad snored so loud, I'm certain I got not a wink of sleep. And on the hostel nights, there was no possible way that I could stay up as late as Dad could. Because at every hostel, he took the opportunity to learn as much as possible about all the different people that were there. Often, he never got to bed before 3 a.m. I learned from this the importance in life of listening and asking people about their life stories, a lesson I work on carrying forward in my life. He also showed me on this trip how it's important to be flexible and make changes in an instant. We were trying to get to a popular beach one day, and I don't even remember which one it was. I know it was a popular one, because suddenly, as we were driving and following the maps to this beach, we saw a sign on the side of the road that said Wagstaff. Well, in an instant, we turned and we started following the signs to Wagstaff. Before we knew it, we were being toured around the town by a lovely old couple who found us a local campground and invited us over for supper after we got our tent and our campsite all set up. It was one of the most memorable days discovering the town of Wagstaff, and yet we never did make it to the beach that we were looking for that day. Speaking of beaches, time on the Australian beaches was an adventure with Dad, especially seeing as they were always well populated with topless women. We had taken a couple underwater disposable cameras with us. There I was laying on the beach suntanning, and I sat up wondering where Dad was. There I look out over the water, and I see Dad, and I'm not going to follow my notes for this because I have to give kind of a visual. And there's Dad out in the water with his camera, and he's in the waves, and he would be ducked down. And every once in a while, he would jump up and duck back down. This went on for several waves. He came to shore and walked up to me as proud as can be and said, "I can't wait to take these pictures home because I've got some good ones to show my brothers." Well, we got home and we developed that roll of film. And the majority of that roll of film was nothing but a lot of splashes of water. I don't think there was a single one that actually came out the way he had intended or thought that they had. Now I gotta try and find where I would have been in that storytelling. So yeah, that was just a small tidbit of my life as an 18-year-old traveling with Dad. But what an amazing experience that trip was for the two of us to have taken that built our bond for years. Of course, as Doug has mentioned, my greatest connection with Dad became farming. I truly think the best decision Andrew and I ever made was the decision in 2006 to move back to Elnora and assist Dad with the farm. Now, at the time we had no plan or idea that we were taking it over. We were just coming here so we were closer to help. However, I can't read my legs. And look, I have to wear these 40-plus glasses, as my children call them. Unlike my siblings, I've never worn glasses till now. One of the things about farming with Dad is he always took safety on the farm very seriously. Never were we allowed to move a piece of equipment down the road without a pilot car. And he always wanted spotters for moving tall equipment. Now, spotters are great, However, you have to look at them to make them effective. We used to have a power line out at the bin yard that ran literally right through the bin yard. And the only way to get into our air bin was to have help to go under the power line with the auger and into the air bin. So there I was, standing underneath the power line, ready to assist Dad and guide him in. And as safety goes, suddenly I see him start raising the auger. As I tried to yell and wave for him to stop, before you knew it, he had the auger right into the power line. Strangely enough, nothing actually happened when we initially hit the power line. So, it seemed to just make sense that if we backed into it and nothing happened, we should just be able to drive away from it and nothing would happen. Don't try that. I'm sure Glenn would attest to us. This is a bad idea. But that's what we tried, and next thing you know, we had sparks going everywhere. The two tires on the auger blew. We had hissing sounds that we didn't know where they were coming from. And Dad, who had just recently had heart surgery, jumps from a tractor to what he thought would be the safest way of doing things. Now, after we called 911 and once again had the Elnora Fire Department out to check on us, he started at me about why I didn't make him stop before he hit the line. I was quick to say, I was trying to wave and yell at you, but you weren't even looking at me. He had to admit he was ignoring his spotter once again, and once everything was safe and we had dealt with all the problems that we had created, the very next call he made was to get that power line buried. And we are so thankful to this day that that power line is not a problem now that we continue farming and that that line is out of our way. Also, the most important lesson I know when farming with Dad was, there's only one right way to do anything, and that's Neil's way. Dad had a thing for a very long time that no one except him could run the drag auger. We would often offer, and he always said no. It had to be done this certain way, and only he knew how to do it. We showed him, however, because shortly after that same heart surgery, there was a call to haul his wheat from the highway, and he could not do it himself. So, can you believe that we actually managed to drag auger that bin without Dad's instruction or supervision, and every kernel of wheat made it into that truck and off to the elevator. Now, when we say the only way was Neil's way, time soon showed that this only stood true unless Andrew had an alternative idea. Then and only then was it up for discussion. I feel grateful that Dad took Andrew under his wing as another son. He did all he could to teach Andrew and I the ropes of farming. We'll never know everything that he knew and everything he could have taught, but he did his best. Andrew and Dad have spent countless hours together, and they truly had a love for one another and the things that they could do together on the farm. Now, you make it sound like Dad would think that Andrew could do no wrong. However, there was one day when Dad may have almost kicked Andrew out of the family. Many of you may remember, Dad started growing his comb over at a very young age. One New Year's, when we were still living out in Saskatchewan, we had the whole family out for New Year's. And as Mom always does in cutting Dad's hair, he felt he needed a haircut before we went out to the New Year's thing. And so there he was sitting in the middle of the kitchen, and Mom cutting his hair, and us all sitting at the table. And Mom jokingly holds up Dad's comb over. She holds up the scissors, and Andrew says, "I dare ya." And in an instant, Mom went. That was the end of Dad's comb over for life. At that moment, we didn't know what to do. We all fell very silent before we roared laughing, and I swear Dad could have killed every single one of us, because Dad had some major meetings to head to shortly after that at one of his conventions, and you can imagine those hairs that had spent years being combed over only knew one way to go. Anyways, from that day on, Dad had no more comb over. Our kids had this pleasure of spending a lot of time with Dad too, since we moved back to Alberta. They all will remember the fact that Granddad was the first to take them on driving lessons, and as we found out, that's with every grandchild. Even though it did start as young as age 9, and Dad would stack up as many books and blankets as he could to make sure the kids could see over and somehow still reach the gas pedals. Of course, Dad also shared many a fishing story and lesson to my boys, and was a wealth of information when it came to gopher shooting and trapping. And nothing will ever top the in-depth beaver education Dad very willingly gave Molly. The greatest pleasure our entire family had was our trip down to the Baja in 2017. Mom and Dad truly had a second family, and still do have a second family down there. And we were able to meet so many of them and realize exactly why Mom and Dad loved their Baja life just so much. Of course, Dad was excited to show us as much as possible in those 7 days. Nothing was better, however, than to see the size of the smiles on the fishermen and women each morning. Each day, another person got their turn going on the morning fishing trip with Dad. Not a morning disappointed, and I know Andrew and the kids can all tell stories of fishing that week. And we will forever remember the morning Mom was letting my girls have their go at a shot of tequila. I mean, we were in Mexico after all. And there we were in the Tlapa when Dad walked in and saw the goings-on and said, "Mary, you aren't giving them that much, are you? You dingbat! There's smaller shot glasses over there." He didn't seem to see a problem in the fact that the 11 and 14-year-old were shooting tequila in the Tlapa at 10 a.m. The card games, the bocce ball, the kayaking, the entire Los Coco Beach experience, along with Dad's jokes and laughter, will forever be embedded in our memories. Dad was so excited for us when we finally moved to our current home out at the farm just under 4 years ago. Some days I honestly felt like he was living his farm dream through us by the hours he spent out there with us. Life just won't be the same without his daily drive-ins with Daisy, just to check what we are doing. He was such a great wealth of information and never in too much of a hurry to sit and visit just about anything. We are going to miss him greatly in our life, but there is one thing I know. I can now go into Mom and Dad's house and not have to leave with a stack of newspaper clippings in hand that Dad so carefully had cut out and saved for us to read. If he only knew the large stack that is currently sitting in my office that Andrew has never even looked at. But we can't throw them out because Neil felt it had something important that we needed to read in it. Now, just as we are doing here today, my greatest wish is that we all will forever be storytellers, just like Dad was.
So both Gary and Glenn describe my dad as the older brother who was a kingpin. I say being a kingpin of brothers is much easier than being a kingpin of sisters. And you all just experienced what a 5-minute Wagstaff story is. And we are going to continue on with some dedications from different eras of Neil's life. First, I'd like to call Bruce Pennick. Bruce, on behalf of lifelong friends from childhood, who those people who grew up with Neil, that were part of forming those foundations of the individual he became.
So listen to the stories, guys. Neil said to me once about playing games with the grandchildren and why he wanted so hard to beat him. He said, am I in it for me to get worse or them to get better? Makes sense. I put down once a friend for life, and that's a bunch of people in this room probably feel the same way about Neil as I do. And Doug asked me to talk a little bit about growing up with Neil and some experiences with him, and I thought, gee, one of the reasons I was a little reluctant to do it, I can't think of. And I phoned my brother Barry, and he thought the same thing. And we said, well, everything we did, Neil was part of it, so I guess I do have some stories about Neil, because he was in it all the way with us. And he was an important part of what we did as kids. Neil hated to miss anything. As a matter of fact, the wedding night, Mary, if I recall, you left the wedding to Three Hills to start the honeymoon, ended up coming back to Barry and Sheila's Didn't want to miss a party after the wedding. So for the grandchildren that think your granddad never got in trouble, I got a little bit of a different story on that one. When we were growing up, you had to be 21 to get into the bar to buy beer, but we had contacts. We knew who to talk to in the bar that could slip some beer out for us for the weekend. And when that didn't work, we would talk Terry Rawlinson, who was here, and to try to crack the local bars around the thing. Now, the funny part about it was Terry was the youngest looking and the smallest guy in the group, but he had more guts than the rest of it. So, and probably his success rate was less than 50%. And he often would come out looking over his shoulder to make sure that we'd be in the getaway car to make sure that nobody was after him. But the one I was most familiar with, we went to Delburn, because we couldn't find anybody else, and went to Delburn. We went in there, and he came scooting out and jumped in the getaway car, and we said, well, what happened? He said, the guy said to me, Sonny, the ice cream stand is just down the street. I know Doug said, Neil often talked about the train story. Well, we got doing stuff with trains as kids, and started with putting coins down on the rail track, and when the freight train comes through, do you know what it can do to a penny? Man, that was good. And the progression, our graduation, was to a Halloween. There used to be a flyer come through Elnora and on the line that would bring passengers in or pick people up. And so Halloween, we're all lined up, probably about 6 of us or 8 of us, typically that at the train station down here, all with an egg behind our back, and the conductor gets off, puts the stand down, looks at us, gets back, puts us, and then starts saying, no, no, no. Well, yes. So then Neil gets this idea and talks to us, I think, why don't one night, I bet we could stop the train. Okay, well, what do you got in mind? So we get down by the crossing, down by Roberts' down here, with a big flashlight, a bunch of us. The train rounds the corner down there and starts heading to Elnora, and we're there with this flashlight like this. Damn, it works. You can all of a sudden you could hear the screeching and the stopping of the train. We're all standing there. It worked. Wow. Unfortunately, when the guys started getting out, they also had flashlights. And if you want to see 8 kids scramble around this town, Barry said he was down by the old Searle elevator. I know I was up behind the Anglican church. I'm not sure where Neil went, but we all went different directions. A couple of other stories. My first year out of university, came home when there was nothing to do on the farm, and Neil was in the same condition. We both got jobs over in Olds, constructing the residence for the Olds College, Doug. And the first day we get there, and it had rained. Neil and I get out, and this was 8 o'clock, handed shovels to shovel wet sand onto a big conveyor up. Okay, this is good. So about an hour of that, the conveyor belts came off. He asked me to go crawl up the conveyor and get the belts back on. As I'm going up, I can see Neil and the other 2 guys that started with me on the shovels looking down. And I remember the guy's name because he was a tough son of a gun. Orla was his name. Keep them shovels moving, boys. So as time progressed, some of the other guys picked up. D. Hodgkinson, I think Barry, you were first, and then D got on, and Rick Roberts. Then another guy that my aunt, Marge, had picked up hitchhiking, he got on. So there were 6 of us going over there and pick up. And then we got this wonderful idea that, gee, we should all go to the lake. Let's find a place at the lake, and we'll work from there. I mean, we go to the lake, we the lake and girls, and this is going to be fantastic. We picked up, I think Terry and Dave were working in Red Deer, so I think there were 8 of us all in a one-room thing over the garage at Pine Lake at Lake's End. One thing that didn't work out, and I don't remember if anybody, the other guys that were there, because a number of them were scattered around here, I don't remember that, I don't think the girls ever showed up. Well, Neil was part of everything that happened in this community. I think he was a founder of the Anglican Young People's Association, the AYPA. Pee Wee Seeger owned the meat market in town, and he was our baseball coach, so Neil and all of us were on the baseball team. As a matter of fact, Neil and a few of us got graduated up to play provincial ball up at Content Bridge for a couple of years. Neil was on the Elnora Huxley hockey team. Now the hockey league for you guys, it was all outdoor ice except for Trocho, the big team. They had an arena in Trocho. And the wonderful part of us, we were good enough to beat them. Bobby Painter's back there, he'll remember that. My next experience with Neil was at university, and I was a year ahead of him, so I was in Lister Hall. Neil came in when I left and went there to the, it's kind of intimidating coming off the farm, and you move into a university with 30,000 people, and it's kind of frightening and intimidating. Well, not Neil. He knew, typical of Neil. He just slid right in. He knew most of the people on his floor immediately, and Neil was always under control. So I was on the 7th floor. I think he was on the 9th floor, and we realized one night that on the phones, if you unscrewed the mouthpiece and took this piece out of there and put it back together and phoned the number, that the phone would ring loud and constantly. You couldn't shut it off. So I said, well, let's go up to Neil's room. He was still sleeping. He snuck in there. He hadn't locked the door. Took it out, put this gooey stuff all over the earpiece of this thing. Went back down to my room, phoned, waited probably 10 or 15 minutes before we went back upstairs, walked in there, typical Neil. He's there, he's got a mess all over his face, and he's got his tools out. He's taking it off the wall. We had to walk in and hand him the device to fix it. But you know, the best part of that whole thing, we laughed so hard. Neil probably laughed harder than we did once he knew we had him. And that wonderful laugh of Neil's that people that were talking to him and phoning to him up to 2 or 3 weeks ago, when they phoned him, he'd still get that wonderful, rich laugh. That's one of the things I'm going to take home with me.
And we're going to progress through Neil's life. So of course, after he attended university, his family grew. By marrying Mary, he married an entire Pemberton family. So I'd like Neil's brother-in-law, George Pemberton, please come up and speak a few words from the Pemberton family.
Thanks, Doug. I'm glad Bruce was up here before me, because Doug had the microphone set at the Wagstaff family level, and the Pemberton family level's higher. See on the service cards, this is called a dedication, but just like everyone else, it's more just some memories that I have of Neil. And I've got to say, it's hard to just tell you memories of Neil, because for about 55 years, I've never thought of Neil or Mary. It's always been Neil and Mary. And I'm Mary's younger brother, so I think I was about 7 or 8 when they met. So I don't even remember a time when Neil was not part of our family. And he almost wasn't. And my first memory, I'm not even sure if it's my memory, if I've heard the story so many times, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard it. Their first date did not go real well. We lived in the west end of Edmonton, and Neil was late. Now, Neil being late will not surprise anybody. But he was really late. And it was a major crisis in our house. But Neil was a farm boy from Elnora, and he just got lost in the city. He finally did track down Mary, and fortunately things went a lot better from there. As I said, I was pretty young when they started dating. And I don't know very many young guys who are doing this these days. But Neil actually tolerated me tagging along with some of the dates. And my wife Bria, this morning when I'm looking over my notes, she says, "What's the picture you have in mind for when you tear up?" Well, I didn't have one, so then I had to think of something. What I thought of is a picture, and I don't know if it's going to be a slideshow later. It's a picture I found, my niece Marilyn found recently, of Mary and Neil in Klondike garb, and I'm about this tall wearing Klondike garb, and they're leading me by the hand down the Klondike Days promenade. So if I start to tear up, you'll know that's the picture I have in my mind is me out on a date with Mary and Neil. Now, one of the dates I remember is going down, it was an old house. People talk about Lister Hall. What I remember is an old house in University Hill. And they took me there, and I met Neil's buddies, and I think John, somewhere back there, was one of them, and probably a few other people in the crowd. And I think it was Bruce just said, Neil makes friends and keeps friends. And that amazes me. He's got friends that go back to high school. The last time we spoke on the phone a few weeks ago, he was still talking about friends that he's known for 50 years that he's just been in touch with. And there just are not that many people that maintain friendships like that. And that takes a pretty special person to keep up those sorts of friendships. Now, a few people have commented, Neil really liked to talk, right? And as my wife really taught me the Irish saying, Neil could chat the hind legs off a donkey. But the great thing about Neil, some people just talk for the sake of talking. But that was not Neil. Neil loved conversing with people. He loved to hear their life stories. And I really enjoyed hearing him relate back the stories he would pick up. And it didn't matter, he dealt with politicians, you name it. He could tell you a story about a politician he met, or a farmer that he met out of the Hutterite colony, or a vendor on the beach at Oahu. And he would tell it with the same excitement and enthusiasm, and he would get to know that person, and he would know that person's life, because he just had a real curiosity and interest in people. And that curiosity extended to other things too. Doug mentioned it. Neil was the first person I ever knew that had a personal computer. And when we were out here last month, those computers were still in the house. I cannot believe they're gone. I can only think that you did not tell your dad to take these out of the house. Because I think one of them was one of the original Osborne computers from 1979 or something. And those were his pride and joy. And Neil was the first person I ever knew that had a handheld GPS. And I remember him talking to me about this GPS, how great it was. He'd been out in the combine, and he used it to mark the spot of rocks in the field. And he was swearing that GPS was going to change the future of farming. And I just kind of silently thought, yeah, right. Well, in fact, I mean, GPS now, every combine can be tracked across every inch of the field. So he was way ahead of his time. He was one of the first people to own a Betamax, like Doug talked about. He carried that big camera around to every family event and filmed everything we had. And you can take a look at it back there. It's part of the silent auction. For me, though, and I think for the Pemberton family, what was most special is how Neil treated our mom. My dad was only 63 when he passed away. So my mom had a lot of lonely years ahead of her and needed a lot of care, of course, as she aged. And Mary and Neil and my sister Joan took great care of her. But Neil really went out of his way to include her in everything that the family did. Whether it was kids or grandkids graduating school, or sports, or things happening here in town, Neil always brought my mom into it. And in fact, she became a proud member of the Elnora Legion because Neil had dragged her into the Legion. So as much as she used to gripe about some of Neil's quirks, like how he was always late, or how he could, God forbid, never waste any food, as much as she liked to gripe about those things, she adored him. And she adored the fact that he and Mary had built such a great life. And he's probably there now, regaling Norm and Daphne and my mom with stories about his great kids and grandkids.
And now, I'm pretty sure the stories we're going to hear are sanitized because it's about his university years and all of his lifelong university buddies. So, Del Zellner, on behalf of everyone in the university buddy group, is going to share a little bit about him.
Well, I don't know if you had a storm here last night, but I stayed. It's got to come back down. Oh, Pemberton fan, that's right. Just forgot about that. I was saying, I don't know if you had a storm here last night, but I stayed at Vigil Lake last night. About the middle of the night, it was just a violent storm. It was lightning just lit up the sky and the thunder just shook the whole building. And I thought, that's bloody Neil up there, reorganized. Putting things in some sense of order. Anyway, it's kind of interesting being the fourth or fifth speaker or whatever it is, because there's a common thread that kind of runs through this. Nobody says you've got to talk about this or that, but storytelling seems to be something that follows the Wagstaff family. And so there's a few stories I'm going to tell. But we met at university, and we were largely a group of farm kids from across the province, and most of our parents probably didn't have post-education, or probably a lot of them never even finished high school. But we decided as a group that we had an opportunity to pursue something that they didn't have. This thing buzzing for you guys too? Must be about hearing aid for something. I can hear, but you can't. I'll better stand up. Actually, this is good because I stand up here and actually see the paper. Don't notice. So anyway, being with a common background, it was only natural that we became good buddies. And also the thing about university, the faculty of agriculture that we were in, we largely took our classes together as a group, all 3 or 4 years. So we got to know each other very well and we bonded in that way. And so we became a group of basically Aggies and friends of Aggies. And we also developed a pretty close friendship with faculties of home economics and nursing. And that's a little wonder that that's where a lot of the future brides came from. Neil was a good student and he was a good Aggie, which meant that he was involved in all kinds of extracurricular activities, which you heard earlier. If there was things to be done, he was part of that group. He helped us organize. We had one big thing on campus we did was called Barn Up. And this was, it took a lot of work. It was a big party that, as the name suggests, bar none, everyone was welcome. It was a big dance at the end of the year, and we had about 5,000 kids from all across the campus that participated in this. There were other events that Neil was always there to help us with, things like the egg club, feeders night. There was intramural sports like hockey and cycle rides, and we had a thing we called the Grog Weekend, which was the great Royal organized games. And this was an assembly of home economics kids and agriculture students from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba to do this exchange of games and other field activities. Neil was a presence in all of these, and of course, he had the house parties and host and candle and all those things. So I want to get on to a couple stories. And one of these stories would have happened almost 50 years ago this weekend. And as it happens with a lot of things, this is a fishing story. Mary was pregnant at the time and awaiting the birth of the first child, Doug, although he didn't know it was Doug or boy, girl, or what. Anyway, Mary had problems with that pregnancy, and she was hospitalized for several weeks before delivery. So it was during this time Mary gave Neil the blessing to go away on a fishing trip, because there wasn't a lot that he could do for her anyway. So Neil planned this fishing trip that involved Robinson, Glenn Pop, and myself. Neil was a self-professed fish whisperer. He knew all the good fishing holes, he knew how to catch them. There wasn't anything Neil didn't know about fishing. He suggested that the place to go that weekend would be to go to Elnora. And he probably gathered this information from some other fishing buddy who was a fish whisperer as well. We pull into the provincial campground at Elnora, and the gatekeeper says, well, we're pretty much full, except for a couple sites along the driveway as you come in here. And there's campers coming in and out. It's been like camping in Eaton's parking lot on Christmas Eve, and we didn't really like that idea. Neil suggested that it wasn't really what we were looking for. We were hoping for a little seclusion, someplace where there wasn't a lot of people. He suggested, well, there must be somewhere around the lake that a little better camping than this. And the chap at the guy says, well, no, not really. He said, but there's Murray's place across the lake. He said, there's nothing there. He said, you'd probably like it over there. So we decided to go to Murray's place. We rode around the other side of the lake. It was just a dirt road. I don't even think it was gravel. It had been raining for the last 3 days. So we jostled in around the ruts and skidded and around the other side of the lake. We pulled into Murray's place. The only other campers there was 3 native ladies. They were sitting around a campfire in a drizzling rain. Certainly wasn't crowded, met our criteria. As you know, Neil likes talking. So he and Jim strikes up a conversation with Murray as to how the fishing was, where the best spots are, what lure to use to catch what fish, and anything that a fish whisperer could use. The thing that endeared me to Murray, Neil asked him this question. He said, well, how deep's the lake? And Murray said, that's not that deep. He said, you could walk across it, there wasn't any water in it. We got up early the next morning, and we started fishing off a reed bank like Murray suggested. We were catching fish just left, right, and center. It was probably the most prolific fishing I'd ever experienced. About mid-morning, there was a boat with 3 Chinese fellows fishing off 50 meters from the side. They're casting away and they're not catching anything. Every time we catch something, you can hear this Chinese banter and you can have us rolling closer and closer. So Neil decides that maybe we could have some fun with these guys. So we have all these fish we've got. So he pulls out a nice sized pike, 16, 18 inches, and holds it up to catch their attention. And says, too small, throw it back. Throw it back. Went back, and they're coming closer and closer. We do this a few times. It was a great laugh. worth losing for sure. The last little story or incident I have to tell is very recent. It was when I last saw Neil on July 12th. And again, Neil being a storyteller, he was as sick as he was at that point in time. And he had come to the point where he realized this was a value to the people. But he was into stories, reminiscing on old things. And it was just such a pleasure to experience that at that point. I don't know where it was. And I don't know how the conversation came about, but anyway, he started talking about the wedding that Mary attended in Banfield, BC. I think it was granddaughter of Mary's sister or something. Huh? Anyway, Mary's the granddaughter was known as Chuck from Banfield. The groom's parents were divorced for many years. And the groom had invited his father. They hadn't had a very close relationship. He hadn't seen him for many years. But he invited him to the wedding, and he never got a response. We didn't even know if he received the invitation or not. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to Banfield, but it's about a 2-hour drive over 90 kilometers of washboard drive from Port Alberta to Banff. And according to Neil, the groom's mother's driving this beat-up old motorhome along this road into Banfield, which doesn't fly on the inside dual. She's pulled off to the side of the road. This car comes along without a province plates, and it was the ex-husband of 20-some odd years, pulled over to help her. For many years ago, they had fallen in love and married, and she was kind of a flower child at the time, and he was a grandfather. Neil happened to mention that name was Rose, and I said, wait a minute. I said, I go fishing with a buddy of mine, Mike Malmberg, in Banfield. And he said, he's been renting this fishing shack for the last 30 years. And there's a picture of Rose and her husband on their wedding day on the wall. So we decided that we better phone Mike in Fort Steele and we Facebook. And Neil was so animated telling this story, and we enjoyed it so much. Anyway, as it was, Neil goes on to relate that Rose, coming to the wedding, she brought all kinds of baked goods. And they were equally as good, but he just smoked them direct. And her and her ex had a pretty good time apparently. Anyway, I want to finish with a little poem that was written by an old farmer. It goes like this. It's called Heads Bent Low. A stooped old farmer and a young man chanced to meet one day. The young one said to the elder in his usual braggart way, "Why don't you walk straight like me? That's no way to grow old. It's all a former habit, that's what I've been doing." The old farmer gave him a knowing look and said, "My dear young friend, have you ever examined your wheat field and noticed the ants in the den? If not, just look them over as harvest time draws nigh, and you'll find that the heads that are empty are standing tall and high. But the heads that count in the harvest are filled and bending low, awaiting the reaper's sickle. It's the time is short dinner."
And as we go through Neil's life, came the Baja years. The last quarter century, Neil and Mary traveled down to Mexico for the winters. And of course, Neil made lots of Mary. We made lots of friends there. And on behalf of the Baja friends, Baja family, I'd like to ask Gord Denham and his wife Gwen to come forward.
Good afternoon, everybody. Most of the stories we heard about Neil and Mary were all in their younger years. We ran into Neil and Mary down in the Baja in our later years, so our stories is more about us being a bunch of old fogies, not doing much, you know, nothing exciting, no bare naked ladies on the beach or anything like that. Just, we started out there, kid.
It was a hot and sunny day on a beach in Baja in 2005 when we first met Neil. He was sitting on a stool outside the door of his trailer filleting fish, close to the door of the trailer. While the rest of the fishermen cleaned their fish down at water's edge, Neil always insisted on cleaning fish right outside the trailer. Our cat knew where to find him, and this started a long friendship between Neil, Mary, and myself and Gord.
Speaking of filleting fish, Neil was the only guy I know that could take a 5-pound triggerfish and fillet it and end up with 1.5 ounces of meat. Anyway, Neil and I wandered over fishing. On our first fishing trip, we found a very good fishing hole. And Neil said, well, we need to mark this fishing hole on a GPS, but I don't have my GPS with me. And, well, that's not so good, is it? Well, we've got to know where to spot, find it. So the two of us decided we'd just put an X on the side of the boat so we'd know where the fishing hole was. Well, that's kind of a true story, because believe it or not, this past winter, when we were down there, that X is still on the boat.
While Neil enjoyed our many fishing and boating outings, he also enjoyed organizing our weekly bocce game. He tended the court all week to ensure that it was well groomed. He was also deeply involved in the annual horseshoe tournament, where he organized 32 teams and kept score. Neil always spoke to newcomers on the beach and would attend campfires. He invited them to games and just made sure that they knew beach rules.
Many nights would find the four of us, that's Mary, Neil, Gwen, and myself, playing card games till late at night. And I have to admit, I found Neil to be a very competitive player. Friday and Saturday nights, we'd head to the restaurant for dinner and dancing. I was always impressed how Neil could do some sort of a prairie chicken stomp out there on the dancing floor.
With all these activities, you would think that Neil would be tired. But no, Mary and Neil did the nightly patrol of the beach, one end to the other. So it was natural that when a locked gate was installed at the entrance to the beach, Neil would be elected the keeper of the key. This job and his involvement in all the beach activities, his knowledge of everyone on the beach, led Neil to become known as the mayor and social convener of Los Cocos.
One year down there, we decided we were going to take a vacation from our vacation and go down to La Paz because they were having Carnival. Carnival is sort of a mini Mardi Gras like they have there down in, what's the name of that place? Louisiana, anyway. And so away we go. We had a great time at Carnival. It was all over. We didn't head home. We thought, well, we'd go down to Cabo San Lucas and enjoy what was down there. But when we left La Paz, it's a big town, strange town, north of it. Well, we got way back into the back end of town and couldn't get turned around to find the main highway to head south to Cabo. All of a sudden, Neil calls me on the radio and he says, there's an ambulance here beside me and he wants to know something, don't know what. I said, well, send him on up to me. And the ambulance driver explained to me that he could escort us out of town. So, lights on, away we go, following behind the ambulance, and he took us back out to the main highway where we were able to get going. Now, I was really surprised because Neil sounded like he'd communicated with that ambulance driver that we were lost. And in those days, I think Neil's command of the Spanish language was pretty limited. He only knew cerveza, margarita, and paño. So I don't know how he managed to talk to that ambulance driver to get us out of town, but we did her.
Neil made many friends among the local Mexicans. He loved going to watch baseball games at the Ball Diamond, which was just a dusty field among the ranch lands of Mulahey. Neil always enjoyed these games as he could see future potential in many of the players. In Mary's Elnora garden, there's a stone carved with Casa de Neil and Mary, made for them by one of those ball players.
Neil's voice echoes in my mind, particularly with these main three things. I can still picture Neil sitting on his camping chair, hollering out, "Mary, when's lunch?" When we played cards, Neil hated it when Mary led off with a trump card, and you'd always hear him say, "Mary, that's Trump." And the other thing that echoes in my mind with him is when we stung him with some cards, he'd always say, "You gotta be kidding." Echoes in my mind real good. There have been many messages received from Neil's Baja friends, and they all express the same emotions. Many Los Cocos what's that say? Oh, Playa Los Cocos will never be the same without you, Neil. I still know how to get a hold of you, old buddy. You're on the radio, and I could call RNW. This is Los Cocos friends calling. Adios, amigo. Have a good journey, and vaya con Dios.
And now in closing, we do have a slideshow. I just want to let you know that I wasn't sure if she was coming to stop me or tackle me or what. That for our family, slideshows go way back. First of all, to create this, we literally had, and we're not exaggerating when we say we had to go through thousands and thousands of photos. Because Dad had every type of photo you can imagine, from slides to DVD to memory sticks to prints to it was on a computer over here, it was on a computer over there, and to save it on this thing you would plug in to 3 different cords to make it fit into the computer today. But the other part is, as 3 children, Jackie, Jody, and I, and Mom and Dad, used to darken the living room, and they'd put up a blanket on the big picture window of my mom and Dad's place, and we would watch slideshows of that he had taken, that he got from John Fukushima, that he got from our grandfather, Pemberton, and we would have these Saturday nights of popcorn and slides. So we felt there was nothing more fitting to finish a service in his honor with a slideshow. So I hope you enjoy it.
that you dream of, dreams really do come true. Ooh, someday you wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind. Be where trouble melts like lemon drops, high above the chimney top. That's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly, and the dreams that you dare to, oh why can't I? Oh, someday I wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind. Be where trouble melts like a lemon drops, high above the chimney top. That's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. And the dreams that you dare to, why, oh why can't I?
Loving can hurt. Loving can hurt sometimes, but it's the only thing that I know. When it gets hard, you know it can get hard sometimes. It is the only thing that makes us feel alive. We keep this love in a photograph. We made these memories for ourselves, where our eyes are never closing, our hearts are never broken, and time's forever frozen still. So you can keep me inside the pocket of your ripped jeans, holding me closer till our eyes meet, and you won't ever be alone. Wait for me to come home. Loving can heal, loving can mend your soul, and it's the only thing that I know. I swear it will get easier. Remember that with every piece of you. And it's the only thing we take with us when we die. We keep this love in a photograph. We made these memories for ourselves, where our eyes are never closing, our hearts were never broken, time's forever frozen still. So you can keep me inside the pocket of your ripped jeans, holding me closer till our eyes meet. You won't ever be alone. And if you hurt me, that's okay, baby. Only one the necklace you got when you were 16, next to your heartbeat where I should be. Keep it deep within your soul. And if you hurt me, well that's okay baby, only words bleed inside these pages. You just hold me, I won't ever let you go. When I'm away, I will remember how you kissed me under the lamppost back on 6th Street, hearing you whisper through the phone, wait for me to come home.
Talk about an uphill battle, 2,000 acres of beans and cattle. But he don't ever get rattled, he just goes till the sun goes down. Hydraulic fluid on his jeans, red-dye diesel and 10 rows between. A cold one on the porch and a good night's sleep. Y'all hold 'em up with me now. Here's to the farmer that plants the fields in the spring, that turn from green to that harvest honey. Hold one up for the banker downtown that got him on his feet with handshake of money. Here's to the farmer's wife that loves him every night, raising a son, raising a daughter. They gather around the table, send it up to the father. Somehow they get closer when times get harder. Here's to the farmer. Subdivisions creeping on in, neighborhood kids keep jumping his fence. He could double his money, but that'd be the end of a promise he'll never break. 'Cause he looked his daddy in the eye, and he's got that stubborn pride. He'll be here to the day he dies. No, he wouldn't have it any other way. Here's to the farmer that plants the fields in the spring, that turn from green to that harvest honey. Hold one up for the banker downtown that got him on his feet with handshake money. Here's to the farmer's wife that loves him every night, raising a son, raising a daughter. They gather around the table, send it up to the father. Somehow they get closer when times get harder. Here's to the farmer.
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes, watching the ships roll in, and then I'll watch them roll away again. Yeah, I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Ooh, I'm just sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. I left my home in Georgia, headed for the Frisco Bay, 'cause I've had nothing to live for, and look like nothing's gonna come my way. So I'm just gonna sit on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. Look like nothing's gonna change. Everything still remains the same. I can't do what 10 people tell me to do, so I guess I'll remain the same. Listen, sitting here resting my bones, and this loneliness won't leave me alone. Listen, 2,000 miles I roam just to make this dock my home. Now I'm just gonna sit at the dock of a bay, watching the tide roll away. Ooh, I'm sitting on the dock of a bay, wasting time.
May the sun shine on your shoulders. May luck and love be your friends. For now, always, forever, till we meet again. May your troubles be few. I hope life's good to you. May your heart beat steady and strong. Yeah, I wish you the best. May you find happiness every step of the road you're on. May the wind fill your sails through the rain and the hail, and carry you safely back home. May your journey unfold to a big pile of gold at the end of your rainbow. May the sun shine on your shoulders. May luck and love be your friends. For now, always, forever, till we meet again. May life fill your glass, may the memories last, and the whiskey kiss you goodnight. May you wake every day with a smile on your face, and the ones that you love by your side. May the sun shine on your shoulders. May luck and love be your friend. For now, always, forever, till we meet again.
thought I had something nice to say, and I lost it. Just before we close, I do want to acknowledge the ladies who have helped us put on the fellowship that is about to follow. And it's just so the way that my dad connected with people, and as you've heard, can make friends in an elevator, just moving 2 floors. One of the friendships that he had through the years was because we're neighbors with the Huxley Hutterite colony. Through the years, he had a number of friends out there. In particular, he had Philip that had worked for him quite a bit, and he befriended him, and Jack, and Frank. And I think Frank was probably the closest friend that over his lifetime that he had from the colony. And when we were looking for someone that would help just serve here this evening, we ended up making a call out to the Huxley colony. And the ladies from the colony agreed that they'd come in and help serve for today. So in advance, I want to say thank you to the Huxley colony and to the ladies today. But here's where the world works in mysterious ways. 2 of the ladies, Jeannie and Anita, are Frank's daughters. That wasn't by any plan. Dad wouldn't think that God works in mysterious ways. But one might think that there was a hand in that today. So Jeannie and Anita, thank you, because unknown until just a few minutes before the service began that our fathers were friends. So thank you, ladies. And I do want to say one last thing that I was going to say earlier when Jody and Jackie both said that Dad had patience. That must have been with the daughters. Because that's not going to be my memory. But with that, again, I want to thank everyone today for taking your time at what turned out to be one of our nicer Saturdays that we've had this year to share with us memories of Neil. And at this time, we do have some desserts to share, and if you'd like to stay and share some fellowship, we can just shift the tables and move some chairs around, but thank you very much, and as I said at the start, death is not an end. It's only an end to a life, not a relationship. And our Father, Neil, was blessed with a gift he gave to our family, as the connections he made with all of you. Thank you. I don't mind if I do.